To go ahead and bring on our presenter, Skylar Lehman. He's founder and chairman of Mission Advancement. He has several decades of experience helping thousands of nonprofits, and he's successfully raised over $6 billion for a variety of missions. Thanks for joining us today, Skylar.
Hey, good morning, Shannon, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a good time this morning. I hope you all have a cup of coffee with you, as I do. It's still that hour, and we still need a little help waking up sometimes. So what does a healthy development operation look like? We're going to dive right into this. And let me also just recognize that we know we have a great diverse group of organizations with us today that represent probably some very large organizations and some of the tiniest organizations where you may not just be the development director, you may also be the executive director and the program director and wear 4 or 5 other hats in your organization. So we're going to try to make this today applicable to all sizes and levels, and hopefully there'll be something in it for everyone, regardless of the size and scope of your work. Before we get in, and we are going to walk through kind of 5 critical areas that you can really hone in on a healthy development operation. But before we do that, I want to take a minute and just kind of regain or gain some perspective maybe on what it is we're talking about in this thing called fundraising. And if you watched any of our other webinars, you may have heard us kind of walk through this this sort of concept or idea. And that is, who is your customer? Now, most of you would probably answer that question based on the type of mission that you have. So I heard Shannon say a moment ago that somebody is here from Treehouse in Minnesota. I know that organization, right? We actually did some work with you probably 7, 8 years ago for a little while. And you would define your customer as at-risk youth in the city of Minnesota. If there's a homeless shelter on, you might describe your primary customer, the person that you serve, as a homeless woman, man, or child. So you get the idea, right? The mission and who it's geared towards serving. But the reason why we really ask this question is in the context of fundraising, you really have 2 sets of customers, okay? And every nonprofit does. And it is obviously the obvious customer, which is those who are the target of your primary mission to why your organization even exists. Your mission statement probably very clearly delineates that and describes the group, the people group, or the issue that you're exist to carry out. But the other set of customers are your support base, and they are a different set of customers in almost every case, okay? Meaning, take the homeless shelter again, okay? Homeless women, men, and children are not the primary funders of that particular mission. It is people who care deeply about the homeless situation, the plight of homelessness, and wanting to do something and make an impact. And so it is a group of people who provide the funding to that, and entities and corporations and foundations as well. But the very idea that they do that, they do it to enrich their lives in some way, and it may make them feel good about helping a cause like that. The idea is that it's incumbent on that nonprofit to also understand that donors do something for a very specific reason. Might be a myriad of different reasons, and we know sometimes people give for recognition, sometimes they give to see impact, sometimes they give to just maybe out of a faith-based decision. So there's all kinds of reasons, but the idea is if somebody gives for a reason, then it is incumbent on the organization to understand that reason and figure out a way to serve that customer base and help them achieve what they're trying to achieve with their philanthropy. Very important concept as we really try to get our arms around this thing called fundraising and what it looks like to have a healthy fundraising operation. So the role of development is to serve the second customer. Okay, the reason why a development office exists, why you may be a dedicated development director, you may have multiple staff, or maybe at least you spend part of your time doing this, is to understand what makes your donors tick and figure out how to, again, how to serve their passions, interests, and needs. You do that because their participation is integral for you to carry out your primary mission. One can't really exist without the other. They're almost, they're two sets of customers that are hitched together and depend on each other for successful existence. And ultimately, carrying out the mission of the organization is what you're trying to do, right? You have to keep both sets of customers happy and content and probably growing, because if your primary mission is going to grow, it probably, at least to some degree, is governed by the extent to which you're able to grow your funding operation. Okay, with that kind of basic premise in mind, then let's talk about what it looks like to have a healthy fundraising plan. And we're going to deal with this in kind of 5 general areas. And we're going to start with events. Almost every nonprofit organization that raises money has events of some kind. Now, you may have a big gala once a year. You may have an auction. You may do a golf tournament like so many private schools. Sorry, it's early in the morning. I'm going to take a sip of coffee because I'm still waking up here, I think. Most organizations have some collection of events. Some organizations are very event heavy, right? And you may have 5 or 6 events that include 10K races and walks and clay target shooting and all kinds of things that organizations have built into kind of special events that raise money and bring awareness to their mission. So I'm going to start with my cynical view toward events. And if any of you have known me for any period of time, you probably know that I'm not a huge fan of special events necessarily. Okay, they have a place, and I'll get to that. So bear with me for a minute. What's wrong with events? Almost everything. If they're done in a vacuum, that is. Okay, and let's talk about why. First of all, let's look at the good side. Okay, the good side is they're fun. And I admit, because we oftentimes are involved with our clients' events. I participate. I love to golf in golf tournaments, and it's always fun to go to the galas and watch everything happen like that. They're fun, right? They promote lots of networking and camaraderie, and sometimes that's a great way for your donors to look around the room and see each other and know who each other are and know that they have your mission in common. It's a way for you to engage and put lots of volunteers to work, because almost all events require lots of volunteers to plan the gala or work the golf outing and those kinds of things. They can raise some money, but the question that we're going to ask in a moment is at what cost, okay? And we'll look at that side. And they're fun. Oh, wait, I think we said that. Exactly. They're fun. That's about the good side of the list. Okay, now you may be saying, hey, we got an event that raises a huge amount of money. We're going to look deeper at that here in just a second. Let's look at the downside of the events. My biggest criticism with special event fundraising is they tend to hide the primary reason for people to give to your mission. That is, they get in front of your mission. They disguise it to a degree. If you think about it for a moment, a lot of people who are invited to come and play a round of golf in a golf tournament, if you're one of those organizations that has an annual golf tournament, oftentimes you're trying to get foursomes, and you may go to the bank or you may go to a business in town and they may say, sure, we'll supply a foursome. And they fill out the foursome with their staff or their employees who come, and they're primarily doing it because they want a day off of work and to have a great round of golf, and they do. But they're not necessarily there to support a mission. They're there because somebody gave them, somebody at their business gave them a chance to come and take part in that mission. If you're doing an auction and you have lots of great auction items and you have a great bidding war going on for the hunting trip to Montana, okay, just as an example, then what happens sometimes is that the hunting trip to Montana becomes the focus instead of your actual mission. And you can look at any event and almost figure out exactly what it is that becomes the focal point of attention. Another point of criticism is that they tend to create silos in your development plan. Now, one of the things that, we didn't talk about this a moment ago, but one of the great things that events really can do and should do in every development plan is help you discover and find new donors. It is a great doorway through which people can come into the organization. But that's not where they should then live for the next 5, 6, 7 years as they continue to support it. The idea would be for them to be promoted and moved into other development strategies that allow them to get closer to your mission. The problem is when your annual gala has a goal, a financial goal, and by the way, the goal this year always has to be a few dollars more than it was last year. That's kind of the way that we always sort of plan and anticipate these things. Then the issue becomes, hey, we got to hit goal. Don't touch my event donors. Okay, so when somebody wants to perhaps visit one of the donors and ask them to give directly to the mission, the event folks have a tendency to say, that's my turf. Don't bother my donors. I need them in order to hit my goal. And then you have a silo created because now your development staff are acting in the interest of the event and not necessarily in the interest of the donors, which the idea here, right, is to serve the donors as a customer base almost and help them to grow deeper and deeper into relationship with your mission. They are labor intensive, okay? And one of the things that, interestingly, when you produce your annual report at the end of the year and you're showing how much money you raised, oftentimes, first of all, events are shown sometimes as only a net proceed. So in other words, only the net makes the annual report. What you really need to do is calculate what the actual costs were of the event and what the gross revenue was, and see what that kind of return on investment really looks like. But even when that calculation is done, and when events are presented in that form of gross revenue against expenses, what is never factored in there are all the staff hours that actually had to go into doing this. And if you're a part of an organization that has a large gala or several events through the year, you probably know that, a few weeks before the event, it's all hands on deck and everybody is working and sort of sets everything else aside. And so they're not necessarily as cost efficient as sometimes we think they are. And events don't raise enough money. Now, again, I know there's at least one person, and there's probably a dozen people on our webinar this morning who would be saying, we have an event that raises a lot of money. Okay, so maybe we're the exception to the rule. What I would say to you is it's probably not the event that's raising the money. Now, you may have an event and you may have lots of people come to the event and make gifts, but they're probably making those gifts because they're probably being nurtured and tended to throughout the year by someone in your organization, and maybe your development team, who sort of build up to that event as being a day of commitment, but it's not the event itself that produces that income. Okay, so that's something for you to think about as you plan to use your development resources as effectively and efficiently as you can. And obviously, if we've learned anything over the course of the last year, it is that they're obviously not COVID friendly, right? And almost everyone has had to postpone, cancel, replace events with other things that do fit within the environment in which we've lived over the last year. And outside of COVID, of course, then there's things like Snowmageddon in Dallas here, Shannon made reference to, or other kinds of conflicts that sometimes kind of just rear their heads at seems like the most inopportune moment. How can events be successful and strategic? Well, as I said a few moments ago, events belong. They do have a place in every development plan, and they're the best strategic approach to the idea of finding brand new donors. Okay, people who will give to your organization the first time. It's a fabulous way for somebody to come and have fun and maybe learn a little something about your mission and make that first gift. But the idea is for them to not live there. For them, the idea would be then to promote them to another strategy that will allow them to move closer to your mission. When we work closely with an organization who has events in their plan, one of the things we encourage them to do, and it always comes off as anarchy when we do, but we oftentimes will say, ditch the financial goal. Okay, that's not the most important reason why you're having the event. Those donors will give. and they'll give in all kinds of environments, but let's set some different metrics for the event, like how many first-time donors can we get to that event? How many new people, how many new gifts can we receive for the first time? How many? Not necessarily what the amount of money is related to it, because what you have to think about is, what is the lifetime value of a donor coming into your organization? And it's far beyond what they'll give in a single event. Measuring those strategic objectives, and then of course, aside from all the metrics and measurements that we've talked about, the idea is to have the event be focused on your mission. So if you're going to have an event, don't have it be about an auction. Don't have that be the centerpiece. Don't have it be about a round of golf. Have it be about people coming together and hearing a heartfelt, compelling, emotional presentation around your mission. Allow it to be interactive and allow them to see aspects of your mission in the event that has them driving home talking about your mission and not about who got the hunting trip to Montana or who shot the lowest score on the golf course. Okay, just a couple more items there. Have a plan for transitioning event donors to more relational strategies. I've kind of made mention of that. And the idea is to have events be in moderation. And kind of the limit that I like to see in any kind of comprehensive development plan is maybe 2 events, and probably both of them have similar metrics. All right, the second area we'll talk about to creating a healthy fundraising plan is making sure that your strategies are aligned. So think of events as one of those strategies. Okay, and in just a moment, we're going to talk about how to align your strategies. And what you have to ask yourself in all the work that you do in carrying out this thing called development is, what are you really trying to accomplish with your plan? And I'm going to take you back to something I said a moment ago, is, what you're really trying to do is engage donors for a lifetime. Okay, now, I don't mean, obviously from cradle to grave, that would be a lifetime, but you're trying to think about bringing somebody on for many, many years. And so you're not as concerned about having their best gift today as you are making sure that they feel engaged with your mission, connected to it, and they are receiving some kind of fulfillment. Okay, their life is being enriched by being involved and engaged in your organization. And that would be the right kind of philosophical kind of undergirding or underpinning of what your development plan is about. When we teach this concept, okay, I teach from a pyramid that looks like this, and we've all seen the cliche shape of a pyramid when it comes to development work. But this is one that may look a little different to you. And it's the personal relationship pyramid. And it says that, look, take the bottom rung of the pyramid there. It says social media friends. By the way, mine would be my Christmas card list, but for many it is their Insta following or Snapchat group or Twitter following and all those kinds of things. But it's everybody that you know, and it is the group that you communicate with. Now, what's interesting is that represents the broad base of people that we all know, but we communicate with them in the most transactional way, okay, through social media. And meaning we're not having really deep conversations with hundreds or maybe thousands of people. You can't. So instead, there's a subset of that group that we have a tendency to see at the coffee pot or water cooler at our place of employment, or we see them at church, we see them at other functions and social things, and we know them by name. There's a subset of that group that would be our friends that we would maybe see in a group. We actually try to do things with them and reach out to them. And then there's a subset or a small group of people that we sort of tell everything to, and they're our best friends in our life. Now, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know about life, right? So, but what I am making a point of here is that this is a perfect model for a development operation. Just like in a development operation, just like in our personal lives, the more you invest in relationships, the more you receive in return. And you think about each one of these levels that are outlined for you in this pyramid, you don't give any more. you give the most to the people at the top rung of your pyramid, and all of us have those best friends that we invest the most time, effort, and energy into, and we receive the most back from. If you didn't receive something back commensurate with what you invest, the relationship falls. Okay, and we've all had that experience before in our lives. So in a development operation, okay, it looks like this. It's the same pyramid, but instead our operations are a little different. Donor acquisition tends to be those opportunities that we have to communicate with the broadest base of participants. So it is the galas and the events. It's the social media and the mass marketing kind of approaches that we use. The appeals that we send out annually. That is the way that we communicate with the broad base. There has to be, or should be, a subset of that group that we invest more time and effort and energy into. And these are people that have shown an interest. Maybe they've raised their hand even and said, I'd like to learn more about the mission and understand what it's about. All the way to the top, who represent those key individuals that probably provide funding for a disproportionate amount that you receive. In other words, they probably largely fund the mission themselves. Might be 30, 40, 50 people at the top of your pyramid who provide most of your funding, but in whom you invest the most time, effort, and energy, because you obviously want their lives to be as enriched as it can be, considering the level of investment they're making. So imagine that the event strategy, and I told you to kind of hold that thought a moment ago. Imagine your event strategy is a segment of pipe, and here it is. That's a segment of pipe. I think that's what that is. And the theory when you conduct an event, right, is that you have prospective donors come in one end of the pipe and donors come out the other. So just bear with me on this analogy for a moment. And special event can be whatever you might have, okay, whatever it might be about, whether it's a gala, traditional gala, or something else. And that's the theory. So if an event strategy is one strategy in your toolbox, in your development plan, then the idea here is that you ultimately would have several strategies. And the way for them to truly become effective is when you begin to align these strategies and have them help feed one another. So back to the donors who walk in the door for the first time and experience your mission and maybe make a first gift in support of your mission at an event. The idea would be to be able to promote them to another strategy that would allow them to grow in their connection to your mission and find out more information and perhaps even have opportunities to give more in support of it. So that would be the idea of being able to promote event donors into a mid-level strategy, and ultimately mid-level strategy promoting donors into a major or principal gift strategy. So this is the pyramid lying down sideways for a moment. Okay, the marketing being the base of the pyramid, the events perhaps being that sort of acquaintance and group friend sort of strategies, mid-level and major gifts moving toward the top of your pyramid, and having a pathway for somebody to meet your organization and grow over a period of time into becoming one of the most important donors that they can be. That pathway is critical to having an effective development operation. Strategic alignment of strategies, okay? Use events for what they do best, right? And that is they do well in finding new donors, maybe showing some part of your mission, but not as the end-all place for funding. Every activity should be designed as part of the strategy, meaning other strategies need to be designed to pick up event donors and pull them deeper into your organization. Stay mission-focused in every activity and measure the things that ultimately promote growth. Okay, now that's a critical piece. Going back to what I started with in events, I said they can create silos if you put a financial goal on them. So if you don't put a financial goal on them, maybe you measure how many donors, new donors, can we promote from an event strategy to a mid-level strategy. No, that would be a metric that would be important to measure. And if the team understood that that was a metric they needed to hit, they would behave differently than they might today, which is leave my donors alone. Creating a healthy fundraising plan. Number 3, board engagement. Okay, and almost everybody probably saw this one coming. This is an important piece. What are the expectations of a nonprofit organization's board? Simply put, leadership by example. Your board is perceived to be closer to your mission than almost anyone else who might support it with their finances or give their time as a volunteer. I mean, they sit around a table regularly, periodically, and help govern your organization and steer it down a successful path. If they are not supportive of your organization on the funding side, then it's very hard to make a case for why someone who is less close to the organization would act and behave the same. I will tell you that as I've been doing this for a long time, 35, 36 years, something like that, and I've had this question, or not this question, this statement made to me from many board tables. Okay, as I'm presenting to a board, and somebody will raise their hand and say, Skylar, you should know that we're not one of those fundraising boards. Okay, I'm sure you've worked with those fundraising boards. We're more of a group of kind of people who are passionate about our mission and care about it, but we're not a powerful fundraising board. Okay, now, okay, I understand that that's probably how, and by the way, that would apply to most nonprofit organizations. In other words, they weren't put together necessarily for the express reason of being a fundraising board. But make no mistake, you are a fundraising board. Now, you maybe don't see yourselves that way. Maybe you're not aware that you're a fundraising board. Maybe you're not very good at it today, okay? But you are a fundraising board because you are the only board your organization has. And that is a key responsibility that comes along with leadership by example. It's sort of like taking the concept of being a parent, right? And saying to your child, I'm not really a play catch with you in the backyard sort of parent. Sorry, son, I'm just a providing parent and a disciplinarian parent. Okay, and your son would look at you and think you were crazy because you'd be right. You're the only parent he has, or you are the only parents he has. And therefore, you can't systematically carve out things that are integral to being a parent, integral to being a board, in leading by example and being everything that you can to support the organization has to include help and support on the funding side. What does that look like? Number one, every board member has to have conviction for the mission. Now, I recognize we probably have some board members on here today, and I'm not trying to take shots at any of you. I believe most boards probably do a very good job of making sure that this is the case. However, I have run across a handful of organizations that will bring people onto their boards with the hope that they'll develop that conviction. In other words, they're using the board seat as a cultivation tool. I'm not a fan of that because that board seat is very important. I mean, you're entrusting the person who sits in that seat to guide your mission down a successful path. I believe you probably need to know that that conviction exists before they take that seat. Every board member should give of their personal resources. It doesn't matter how big the gift is, because we understand that some board members have the ability to give hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, okay? And other board members might have the ability to give $100, okay? What's important is that every board member lead by example and according to his or her means. And it's a proportionate giving response that's important. But again, if they're not willing to do it, then how can you make the case for why someone who is less close to the organization should do it? I believe that most board members should rank the mission that they're serving on the board of in their top three. Okay, now it says top 3 to 5 on here, a little leeway. If I'm coming to talk to your board, I'm probably going to say it should be the top 3. In other words, if you're going to allow somebody to sit in one of your board seats and guide your organization down that path, it only stands to reason that they would make it that important to them. If they can't, then I'm not sure that's the kind of person you want sitting in that board seat. In other words, are they really truly going to give you everything that you need from them, even on the mental side of attention and focus and priority? as they're steering you down that path. You would hope that board members would introduce you to their networks. Okay, and before we're done today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the kind of natural anxiety around that sort of thing. There is, and it's normal. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that anxiety doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. It's important for us to be able to meet board members' personal network of friends and colleagues. They need to participate as impassioned volunteers. And there's lots of ways you can do that. It doesn't mean they have to all become hardcore fundraisers, but there are ways for all board members to take part in your efforts. How can you engage your board? Get them some training. That's the easiest and most simple answer to the question. Call my firm. We will come and provide training. When I finish this today, I'm driving down to Caldwell, Texas to go spend the day tomorrow with the board in a retreat. And the idea is the board has desire to go much deeper into funding their mission. And we'll spend half a day kind of delving into creative ways that they can do that. Reset your board expectations. It's hard to flip a switch and say we're going to become a fundraising board tomorrow. Okay, it doesn't happen that way, and inevitably it takes a period of time. But you have to have a transition plan. And one of the ways that can be done is to say, going forward, as we bring new board members on, we're going to bring them on with a different set of expectations. So we change the job description, and we change the manner in which we enlist them, and we try to create that sort of culture shift in the way that board members will become engaged. Build an effective development committee. Effective is the operative word. There are lots of organizations that have development committees. Many of them don't really know what they're supposed to be doing as a development committee. An effective development committee is one who, they're not the boss of development, okay? They're not the board of development, because development already has a boss, and that's the executive director or the head of school or the president or whomever it is that leads your organization. They don't need a second boss. That only creates communication issues and confusion. What they need are a subset of the board who agree to sort of roll their sleeves up and go to work beside the development team, bringing that impassioned volunteer perspective to the work that they're doing. Involve the board in the strategic planning process, in the strategic development planning process, that is, creating your development plan. Okay, just some ideas and some thoughts. The fourth area of creating a healthy fundraising plan is having realistic financial benchmarks. Okay, in other words, how do you know you're being successful in the work, and what are you measuring to get there? First of all, on the funding side, just metrics to watch when you are raising funds, and this is to all the development staff who are trying to figure out. I'm sure you're, depending upon what software you're using right now, your metrics are partially driven by the terminology they use. There's three metrics that you need to pay attention to. Okay, retention, growth, and the third one should be new donors. All right, my apologies. We'll fix this. But retention, growth, and new donors are the three metrics that you need to pay attention to as a fundraising professional. Retention is listed first because it is the most important one. That is, how many of your current donors can you hang on to that you had last year, and how much of their giving can you hang on to year over year? It's much easier to get somebody to give again what they gave than it is to get somebody who's never given to you before to give the first time, right? So retention should be the most important metric that you always watch and monitor. How many donors and how much of their giving can you hang on to? Growth implies growth in current donors. So that's the second most important thing. It's much easier to grow current donors than it is to find a new donor, okay? And although we don't think of that, and I would even say this, that almost, I'm gonna say it across the board, probably every mission that is on our webinar today, you could double your development income by not finding another new donor. Now, you may be shaking your head or rolling your eyes at me right now. First of all, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't go find new donors. Okay, you need to do that. It's a healthy thing to do. But what I am saying is the most effective and efficient return on investment will be what you put into growing and nurturing your current donor base, because there's capacity in your current donor base to do significantly more. The third metric that ought to be the third item on this slide right here is finding new donors. And you always have to have that pipeline. And that, again, that's what your event strategy ought to be ideally aimed at, is having that doorway through which new donors can come. Now, let me address the third item that you see on the list here, which is revenue to cost ratios. That's another metric that not only the development staff, but probably the board and executive director should be aware of in every organization. And what it simply means is, how much money do you raise and how much do you spend raising it, okay? And a healthy revenue to cost ratio is raising $4 at the expense of $1, a 4-to-1 revenue to cost ratio. Okay, so that means that if you raise $1 million, right, you would spend no more than $250,000 doing it. What makes up the $250,000? Salaries of your development staff, okay, the direct fundraising costs, printed material, travel to go see donors, things like that. The cost of events. So you got to, if you have a golf tournament, you have to put in the golf course rental and all the catering and things that you spend money on at that. You don't get to erase that with sponsors. Okay, sponsors show up on the revenue side. Costs show up on the cost that you actually incur in putting on those events. You want to be at a 4-to-1 revenue to cost ratio. Now, some of you may be saying 75 cents on the dollar actually makes it to the cause that we're trying to get it to. That's good, and that's par for the course. Okay, no matter how big the organization gets, those revenue to cost ratios hold true. Very few organizations do much better than that. If you are doing better than that today, what I would tell you is you're probably thinly staffed, and you probably should reinvest in infrastructure to bring it back in line, because that's the only way you're going to have capacity for growth in the future. Retention. I talked about this a moment ago, but it is a reflection of honesty, integrity, and trust, and fulfillment of expectations. In other words, this is how we treat donors well. Today, you hear the term donor fatigue used constantly, and I think it gets used for things that it gets blamed for everything. Okay, oh, it's donor fatigue. Why is our funding down? It's donor fatigue. Why didn't our capital campaign reach its goal? Donor fatigue. Not the case. Donor fatigue probably does exist, but here's the word that I would prefer to use. What donor fatigue really means is donors being underwhelmed. Okay, underwhelmed, underserved, and the organizations. It's not just from frequency of giving or longevity of giving, because there are donors who give to other organizations, other missions that never experience fatigue. And it's because they do an excellent job of helping them feel fulfilled, their lives enriched, meeting and exceeding expectations of donors along the way. And that's what leads to quality retention. All right, the last area that we'll talk about is executing a relationship-based strategy. And of course, you probably knew this one was coming as well. This is the kind of the centerpiece of what Mission Advancement Professionals is about, is bringing that relationship-based strategy to bear on any organization. And so the slide that you're looking at right now shows the spectrum of decisions, meaning on one side you see transactional giving, and that is when you open a piece of direct mail and fill out a pledge card or commitment card and write a check for $100 and send it off, that is a transactional gift. A transformational gift is one where you are involved in deep relationship with the mission. You understand exactly the impact that your gift will make. It's probably a much larger gift. You're in relationship with ambassadors of the mission, and you have people who are showing you behind the curtain of how the mission actually works. And you care deeply about the outcomes of the gift that you just made, okay? And the journey starts with transactional with most donors, and the idea is for it to be able to move along that spectrum all the way to the transformational end, And when you get to the transformational end, you're probably beginning to experience what we would define as a capacity gift, meaning the largest gift that someone has the ability to give. Now, for some, that could be $1 million or more. For others, it might be $1,000. Okay, but regardless, it is that transformational end of the spectrum that is the target and where we're constantly trying to move donors toward. Why should you ask for major gifts? And this is important sometimes for small nonprofits who are getting comfortable with this thing called fundraising, because it wasn't really what they signed up for. Right? If you have passion for your primary mission, probably very few of you have passion for fundraising. That's okay. That's human nature. But we have to get comfortable with this idea that we have to ask. Why do we ask for major gifts? Well, what's interesting is, we just, as a society, we get really funny and strange about this concept of asking for money. For some reason, money changes everything. Whereas when we're asking somebody for time or a favor of other kinds, we're very comfortable asking. Okay, if I need help doing something in my home over the weekend, I'll call my oldest son up and say, "Can you come over and help me this weekend?" Okay, I don't hesitate whatsoever to ask friends for help or advice or counsel on certain things that I might need their help. But when it comes to asking them for money, suddenly everything changes, and we get this kind of gets bunched up in our brains. It shouldn't be any different. Okay. In fact, I could probably make the case that giving money is sometimes easier than giving time. And I'm sure you have supporters who would think and feel the same. Asking is proactive, and it allows you to at least have some control over where you're ultimately headed in your development operation. Why ask for a specific gift? Okay, now that's different. Asking for gifts is one thing, but asking for something specific, for you to sit in front of a donor and say, "Can I have $10,000?" Okay, will you give $10,000 to support our mission? That feels different than saying, "Will you make a gift? Will you do the best you can to give to us this year?" A specific gift is important to ask for. Okay, now what you have to kind of get your arms around is there has to be a basis for the gift amount that you're asking, and it has to be the basis has to be more than just believing they have more money to give. Okay, so the bottom line is this: you're asking for specific gifts because you need specific gifts. As an organization, you've probably gone through this thing called budgeting, like everybody does, right? You're fiscally responsible. Before your fiscal year begins, you've probably put together a budget for how much money you need to carry out the primary mission. You know how much money you need. So what you need to do is break that down into some chunks and say, these are the chunks that we need to have fully funded. You ask for specific gifts because you need specific gifts. It provides a very clear plan for a donor to really understand and get their arms around as they're contemplating what they might ultimately give. If you ask somebody to give large, okay, large to them they might be thinking large. It might be $500, when the reality is large to you might mean $5,000. 5,000 might be possible, but if they're not thinking and they don't understand the magnitude of your need, it's difficult for them to get to the size that you're thinking. Savvy donors expect it. I've had many a times when donor stories, when donors will say, and they'll hold the development director accountable, and they'll just say simply, "Hey, come on, I know you have a gift in mind. Ask for it. I want to know what you're looking for," because they understand that organizations do need specific chunks of money in order to be successful. And hope is not a strategy, meaning if you don't ask for the specific gifts that you need to be successful, then it'll be an accident if you actually raise the money you need to fund your mission. Why should you ask someone you know? Okay, and this goes back to the concept of the board introducing their networks, okay? And look, I serve on boards. I've been through this too, and I will tell you, like every other human being in the world, I feel the same anxiety that you do or that others probably do with going to see their best friend for a gift, or their brother or sister or parents, and that sort of thing. and a lot of times board members will say, it would be better if someone who knew them less than I do, somebody who didn't know them, they could probably say, I just feel funny about asking my good friend. So the way I got around this is I had to come at this from the perspective of thinking about why I serve on this organization's board in the first place. Obviously, it's a mission that I care about, and being involved in that mission enriches my life. And if it enriches my life, it stands to reason that it can enrich the life of my friends or my relatives. In the same way that when I read a great book and I finish that book and I'm on fire to get someone else that I know to read it, I'll buy it and send it to them, or I'll text them and say, hey, pick up this book and read it, and then let's get together and talk about it. If I see a great movie, I'll do the same thing. Or, what are you watching on Netflix, right? That's the big question that we all ask. And we're very quick to pass on advice, because whatever we're doing enriched our lives, we want it to enrich the lives of others. Does it not stand to reason that serving on an organization and giving to an organization whose mission is compelling and important enriches our lives, and that it could also enrich the lives of those that we care about that are in our immediate network? You can't make somebody give, but as their friend, as your friend, they certainly can give you a hearing and make that decision for themselves. Okay, you have a finite amount of time as a development professional, even as a board member volunteering your time. Should you spend it with the 5 nicest people? There are days when we need to do that, okay? Or the 5 people who could fund your entire mission. And that's just simply saying, hey, strategically, we've got to figure out who we go to that can ultimately get us the funding so that we can grow and expand our mission. And it's that high capacity donor. It's that blue section of the pyramid that has to be the focus of our relationship-based efforts. It doesn't mean that no one else is important. They all are. We need donors at all levels, and they all have a role to play. But we know that the untapped potential in most organizations is what exists in that blue section. And that's what can ultimately double your income, double your development revenue in a relatively short period of time, just by investing more, putting more heat and light against that particular piece of your donor segmentation. Greatest potential of any organization is in its existing donor base, and that's a different way of saying what I said earlier, that anybody could double their development income by not finding another new donor, by just investing in those that already exist. All right, in short, make it about the donor. And that's what the relationship-based piece of it is. Those are the 5 areas. I'm going to run through this last slide, and then I'm going to pull Shannon back in here to facilitate a few questions before we run out of time today. The path toward growth, just in summary, is, hey, give all of your events a good hard look. You're going to have an audit done of your events, and that's something that you can hire a firm like ours, or there's other fine firms out there too that do this. But sometimes it's good to have an outside perspective to help you kind of look at your events and figure out how to rein them in and not become event crazy. You have to develop your story, and meaning you have to have a very concise way of sort of telling your story and presenting the conflict that you're trying to overcome through funding, through additional funding. You need to package projects from inside your budget to be able to present to some donors and allow them to get their arms around a specific aspect of your mission. That's a critical piece to engaging donors on a relational basis. Focus on fewer to build relationships, okay? Going deeper with fewer is our motto. Engage your board members to help, not necessarily to do it on their own, but to help and sit beside the development director in some of those meetings. And if you're a development director, you got to get out of the office. And I know we're not completely out of COVID yet. We're starting to, hearing more on the news of certain parts of the country are opening up and getting more and more open, and that's only going to continue to be the case in the weeks ahead. Get back out of the office, get back face to face, and spend time with your support base. All right, Shannon, why don't you come up and we'll take the last few minutes here to field some questions that might have arise.
Great, thank you so much. So if you do have a question, you can put it over on the right-hand side in the questions panel, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. I do want to give one reminder. Skylar talked about building an effective development committee on your board, and that is going to be the topic of our third and final leadership series webinar that is going to take place in 2 weeks on March 18th. That is a Thursday, and it will be back at noon Central. So I hope that you will sign up there. I will include the link in the email follow-up that you're going to receive later today. So Skylar, we have a couple of questions. The first one's from Kristen, and she has a question on that 4-to-1 ratio, and she's asking if it includes federal and private grants.
If your development staff is involved in securing those and writing those grants, and doing all the maintenance work of reporting and all that kind of thing, then yes. I mean, it's revenue that your staff generates. If it's income that's coming as a result of your program staff doing all the work, then I wouldn't include it. So there has to be an honest inclusion of things that your development staff actually does to do it. I mean, you should also, by the way, I didn't get into this, but part of that calculation should also probably include at least part of your executive director's cost to the organization, assuming your executive director is also involved in the funding side of the mission.
Great, thank you. Anne is asking, would you offer some tips about how to communicate to staff that membership in our organization is more about supporting our mission than getting discounts on programs? And she's looking to move towards that relational approach rather than transactional.
Sure, I understand exactly what you're talking about. So look, the discount. I don't want to kick dirt on any strategies that are being done here. I mean, discounts on ongoing programs, that might be a reason to draw people in, and that might bring you new people. What you have to do is you have to engage with them and give them a better reason to stay and to go deeper. And I can use lots of other examples to promote that, but the idea is to probably figure out some way to communicate with them and have them understand the value that can come from them going deeper and supporting a mission that they begin to care deeply about.
Great. Linda's asking, how do we transition from fundraising that's heavily reliant on events to one that is more relational based?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound like Ross Perot for a minute, but if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. And what I mean by that is, if your calendar is filled up with events, you're going to have to break a couple of those events. You're going to have to stop doing some of them and create bandwidth in your staff to be able to engage at least in small groups or one-to-one, maybe it's voice-to-voice or it's Zoom meetings, and begin to open the dialogue with people more deeply related to the mission. It's not the events that are going to ultimately get you there. And if you're one of these organizations that has 4, 5, 6 events through the year, I would say you should probably try to cut those in half and figure out the ones that aren't really raising a ton of money right now, and then take all that newfound time to invest in relational strategies. And if you need help with that, give us a call, because we would love to work with you to help you kind of implement those relational strategies.
Absolutely. So I think we have time for one more. Christopher's asking, what kind of metrics or report would you share with a board prior to a board meeting?
So you want the board, that's a big question, only because we do entire webinars on how to work, how boards should engage with the nonprofit organizations. Hopefully your board is not in the weeds, okay? And if they are, they're probably too involved, their fingers are too engaged in the details. I think it's important for the board to get an update on how you're doing against your development goals on several benchmarks. You'd probably share with them the high-level metrics. Boards should not be involved in who gets hired as a development staff member, things like that. So You want a high-level report, not altogether different than what they look at on the finance side of the organization, on the expenses side. And you want that report to be given by your development committee chair, who would probably be briefed and prepared and fed information by the development director, who has a very clear idea of exactly where you are in those metrics. So I would say report on retention, report on growth in current donors, report on finding new donors, okay, and those 3 metrics that we talked about on that one slide earlier in our presentation today. And then, you know, where are you against your financial goal of where you said you would be at this stage? But probably not much deeper than that.
Great. Well, that is actually a perfect segue into the development help worksheet that you're going to get as follow-up to today's session. So, Christopher, I hope that you can take some of this and develop those metrics to give to your board so that they can be part of this process, as Skylar mentioned. So again, you will be receiving a recording of today's session. We'll send you out the slides and that development health worksheet, and that link to the 30-minute consultation that I hope that you take us up on if you have any specific questions or want to dive a little bit deeper. And I hope to see you on March 18th as we talk about how to form an effective development committee. Thank you so much for joining today. And Skylar, thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye.